Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My task is to examine the outlook for the industry this year. I guess surely the big question facing us is whether or not we're going to see the world economy tipped into recession this year. Our air cargo business has often been a lead indicator of wider troubles in the industry, wider difficulties in the economy. And those of you with serious cargo businesses have had a pretty difficult time in the last few months. We've actually seen the cargo market shrinking by around about 5% from where it was in the middle of last year. On the other hand, the passenger business still looks pretty healthy, at least in terms of volumes, growing quite significantly through to the early part of this year. And I think what we're seeing in our business reflects what's happening in the wider economy. For we've seen a collapse in international trade following the imposition of tariffs by the US and retaliatory tariffs from China and other countries in the first part of last year. International trade is shrinking today, and clearly that is very bad for the cargo business. But you'll note that actually global growth, global GDP growth is, yes, it's slowed, it still looks fairly healthy. Governments have been responding to the weakness in trade by injecting money into the economies. And actually, certainly in the first part of this year, the global growth looks reasonably good. I think a recession doesn't look likely this year. But that doesn't come without a downside, because we've now had 10 years of expansion, and that's creating shortages. It's raising costs, it's causing wage increases. And probably the big financial challenge for the industry for the last 18 months has been the rising costs that we've been facing. And I suspect that's going to continue to be the key challenge this year, to resist or to mitigate those costs. But I think we can also see from the unit revenues shown here that we've got a new challenge. And from the middle of last year, we actually saw our ability, at least in some regions, to recover those costs disappear. Unit costs have been falling, and that's been squeezing margins. So we've got a two-part challenge this year, both to resist the costs and to recover the costs that we can't. That has been squeezing profitability, and the Director General announced that our revised assessment of profits this year was reduced. We now expect the industry to generate $28 billion of profit. Of course, for our investors, what's important is what that profit represents as a return on capital. And we reckon that that's about 7.4%. And I think it's important for us to recognize the remarkable transformation that we've seen the industry go through. Since 2015, the industry has generated sufficient profit to generate value-creating returns for its investors. We've seen 4 years of that. We think we'll see a 5th year of value creation for investors. And I want to emphasize the importance of that point. And let me translate those percentages into billions of dollars of value created for our investors. We used to be a value-destroying industry. We heard earlier about the environmental challenges that we face. That's going to require investment. We need to make sure our industry stays in the black, creating value for our investors to attract the capital that we're going to need over the years ahead. As I say, I think we're going to see the 5th successive year of value creation this year, but we need to keep it there. And I have some confidence that we have the structural changes in place to enable that to happen, notwithstanding the difficult business conditions that we're facing. And I think we can see here that we've seen a structural improvement in the gap between overall load factors and break-even levels. I think there have been two key drivers of that emergence of that gap, and it's that gap that drives return on capital. It's that gap that drives profitability in the industry. We've seen the emergence of ancillaries with the unbundling of the product. I think that's been a critical driver of better performance. And we've also seen partnership, most importantly, I think, on international markets with joint ventures. And I think both of those factors have been critical in driving this improvement. Both of those factors suggest that in more difficult conditions, there'll be some underpinning on industry earnings. But both of those factors are under pressure. They're under scrutiny from regulators. And I think one of the challenges for the industry is to demonstrate the consumer value that's created by both of those developments. And we heard a lot, didn't we, earlier about the environmental challenges. They need to be solved. But I think we need also to recognize that this industry creates enormous value, both for our customers, but also for the wider economy. The unique contribution that we bring is to connect cities. And we've actually more than doubled the number of cities that we connect in the last 20 years. This year, we're going to connect another 1,000 cities, according to what the schedules are suggesting at the moment. Moreover, we're doing this at lower and lower real cost. The costs of transport for business and for consumers has halved in real terms over the last 20 years. These two factors have provided an enormous stimulus to the flows of trade, of investments, of people, and the exchange of ideas, the fundamental building blocks of economic development, of job creation, of poverty reduction. Thank you for listening.